Number 10. Roche. Roche was the top crime lord in Madripoor initially. He was opposed by TYGER eventually, who was actually Jessan Hoan. Hoan was caught up in a reaver attack while they targeted the bank she worked at. Because she was a lone survivor of that attack, she ended up kind of being ostracized by her family. As such, when Hoan learned that Roche was the mastermind behind the reaver's attack, she dedicated her life to taking him down and becoming the new head honcho in Madripoor. She became TYGER and would eventually take down Roche with the help of Wolverine during his time as Patch. Roche himself didn't have any superpowers but was extremely well connected and was quite a physically strong opponent as well, especially for just being a guy. Number 9. Tombstone. Tombstone is a villain of Spider-Man who ended up getting into the world of crime and becoming a villain because he was severely mistreated as a child and tormented by the other kids he grew up with. This was what turned Tombstone, aka Lonnie Lincoln, into an antagonist for the other kids, training to become strong so that he could torment them right back, threatening them and of course stealing their lunch money, doing all the things that meanies do. From there, Tombstone would end up growing up and into the life of a criminal. He would become an enforcer and eventually would run his own operation, becoming a crime boss of New York. One of the crime bosses who was recently called on by the mayor of New York at the time, the Kingpin himself. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to learn about even more crime bosses in the world of Marvel, of which of course there are many crime bosses out there, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Madame Masque. Madame Masque is the daughter of Count Nefaria. She goes on to become a rival of Kate Bishop's, Hawkeye, when Kate teams up with Clint in David Aja and Matt Fraction's Hawkeye series, but then decides to go her own way, heading out to live in LA. During her time there, Kate crosses paths once more with Madame Masque and her father, Count Nefaria. Mainly though, Kate pisses off Madame Masque, aka Giulietta Nefaria. Prior to that, Madame Masque was actually known for being an Iron Man villain, as well as sometimes an Iron Man ally and even an Iron Man love interest. Madame Masque has also worked alongside her father, and ultimately her allegiance often remains with her family, which means that no matter how many times she ends up on the straight and narrow, even becoming a borderline hero at times, she pretty much always returns to her criminal ways. Madame Masque, like her father, has also been allied with the Magia and worked as a criminal leader and mastermind for that organization. Number 7. Viper. Another rival crime lord that TYGER would eventually go up against was Ophelia Sarkissian, or as she is often known in the comics, Viper. Viper has often been in league with Hydra, but there have also been times when she's branched out on her own somewhat. For a time, Viper was actually the ruling monarch of Madripoor, seeing an opportunity to seize the nation and fill a gap after it was left without a monarch to rule over it. She ended up allying herself with Wolverine, who owed her a debt, in order to use his influence to seize control of Madripoor. And her plan? It worked. Wolverine was honor bound to Viper and did agree to marry her. However, he did end up getting Viper to agree to a divorce after leveraging her own life, which he had just both saved from demonic possession and in the process endangered. Viper would end up having Madripoor taken from her by the combined efforts of Tony Stark and TYGER, with the Tiger replacing Viper as the ruling power of Madripoor. Because I don't think TYGER becomes the princess of Madripoor, but you know. Down with the monarchy, I think, is what happens, maybe? Number 6. Hobgoblin. Well, you might think it's weird to include a villain like Hobgoblin on this list, the fact remains that while Roderick Kingsley is also often known as the mastermind behind that mantle, a lot of his machinations have involved him using others to build his own criminal empire. In fact, at one point he literally turned the criminal lifestyle into a complete business. He sold old mantles and equipment of minor deceased or MIA villains. In exchange for these mantles, personas, and items, he received a cut of the earnings of those he gave them to. So basically, he didn't even need to be committing any crimes, but regardless, he would still profit from others' dastardly deeds. This is like more minor, but still power broker levels of criminal shenanigans. During this time, when Kingsley was the manager and owner of various villain franchises, he also allowed Phil Urich to continue to use the Hobgoblin mantle, but only if he also paid Kingsley for its use by giving him a cut. Number 5. Power Broker. The Power Broker currently in Marvel Comics is a mysterious figure whose true identity is not yet been revealed. But previous to that, we know power broker is Curtis Jackson. However, with the former power broker now dead, that's Curtis Jackson, a new unknown character has risen up to seemingly take Jackson's place. And whichever power broker we're talking about, the fact remains that they are one of the most powerful crime bosses out there. They are, they have been, and they probably will continue to be. Like Roderick Kingsley's Hobgoblin, who we discussed earlier, the power broker is another villain who has mastered the art of turning crime into a business. In the power broker's case, they generally grant powers to people after getting them to sign a contract that generally promises, regardless of their alignment, a portion of the profits from said powers will be paid to the broker themselves. As heroes aren't as well known for turning profit, generally the broker's clients tend to end up as mercenaries or criminals. Power Broker also has been affiliated with Power Broker Inc., their own corporation, and the Hench app, which partnered up supervillains with compatible henchmen for when it came to their heists. Number 4. TYGER. TYGER was once Jessen Hoenn, and as you know by now, she is a very influential figure, mainly based in Madripoor. She ended up becoming the woman known as TYGER in order to get revenge on crime boss Roche, and following his defeat, she took over his role as major crime lord of Madripoor, or crime lady I guess. TYGER is so influential that she was part of Prince Baran's close circle back in the day. She took control of Madripoor following the defeat of Viper as Madame Hydra, who temporarily ruled the island nation. TYGER has lost complete control of the island at times, but is always considered a major key player when it comes to the governance and business of Madripoor. However, she typically is painted as the most moral of the crime lords of Madripoor. While TYGER isn't afraid to get involved in illegal activities, she does try to keep the illegal activities she dips into more clean, and doesn't really get involved in anything that could cause the people of Madripoor a great deal of harm. In other words, she's not known for trading in people or really in hard drugs, and will actively speak out against or even seek to stop crime lords who would. Number 3. Count Nefaria. Count Nefaria isn't just a powerful crime boss either. Like some other bosses out there, he's also managed to get his hands on physical power and powers as well. Count Nefaria is Count Lucino Nefaria, also the father of Madame Masque. He comes from a long line of nobility, which has granted him a fortune, one that he has prided himself in growing and expanding through criminal enterprises, as Nefaria is also a member of the powerful crime organization, the Magia. Nefaria would go on to use his fortune and his pursuit in the area of science and advancement to gain superpowers himself. Shortly after this development, he would die, but then he'd also be brought back, and as a result of that, become even more physically and mentally powerful and durable. So Nefaria is strong in a lot of ways. Number 2. Kingpin. Probably the greatest of all criminal empire masterminds in the Marvel Universe is Kingpin. Wilson Fisk is known for being one of the most powerful, influential, and overall politically conniving and manipulative of all the crime lords out there. The crazy thing about Fisk too is, while his methods can be questionable at times, he is so powerful because he is actually a pretty good leader overall. When he was young, Fisk realized the importance of politics, and became well versed in many different political tactics and political science, believing it to be the most useful skill when it came to gaining and maintaining power. And honestly, it seems like he was right. It's often his wit and his stratagem that make Fisk such a dangerous villain. Despite the fact that he is also insanely strong and physically powerful, it's really his mind and his influence that you need to watch out for. And his intel, he knows a lot of stuff. Number 1. Zhu Wenwu and the Ten Rings. Zhu Wenwu has to be the most powerful crime boss we have seen in the greater Marvel multiverse. That's right, when it comes to Earth 616, I feel like I have to give it up for Kingpin, but when it comes to the MCU, the alternate reality of Earth 199999, I think Zhu Wenwu takes it. Wenwu is the father of Shang-Chi and is an immortal crime boss whose aging was dramatically slowed by the Ten Rings. The Ten Rings are both the artifact that he wields, which grants him great power, but is also the name Wenwu Wenwu gave to his army, who helped him seize power and maintain his control over the years. Wenwu built such a massive criminal empire in the known world that he began to seek out the unknown, mystical, and mysterious places on Earth, such as Ta Lo, where he ended up meeting his future wife Ying Li in his search for power. His love for Ying Li made him give up his pursuit of power, but after her death, he would soon return to a life of crime and once again continue to seek more power, believing that in giving that up, that was what had made his family vulnerable to attack in the first place. In his place, his daughter Zhu Zaling became the ruler of the Ten Rings and her father's criminal enterprises.
Coming in at number 10, we have Sal Maroni, one of the biggest mob bosses in all of Gotham City without any superpowers. Known for having zero regard for human life and having even supervillains think he's a cold-hearted murderer, Sal's most iconic moment was actually the creation of a villain later in this list, when he threw acid in the face of District Attorney Harvey Dent and permanently scarred both his face and his soul. And while this acid attack was retconned during the New 52 into having been committed by someone else in Harvey Dent's life, Sal continues to appear in Batman comics as a vicious and intimidating mafia figure. Coming in at number 9, we have Morgan Edge, the founder of Intergang. An international crime syndicate working in the shadows across the entire globe, Intergang was created while Morgan was being manipulated and tutored by Darkseid, who had been sending visions to Morgan ever since he was just a little boy. Appearing to the public to be the charismatic leader of a media corporation and a potential rival to Lex Luthor, Morgan was secretly running one of the world's biggest crime empires, all in the service of an intergalactic warlord. Some people just do it for the money, but Morgan Edge had a different sort of reasoning entirely, and even after cutting ties with Darkseid, would go on to help form the Superman Revenge Squad. Coming in at number 8, we have Tobias Whale, the arch enemy of Black Lightning. An African-American albino crime lord that originally got his start as the leader of the gang known as the 100 in Metropolis, he's worked his way through many different criminal organizations over the years, even serving as a public face for Intergang for a time. His most notable criminal act occurred after the school teacher Jefferson Pierce spoke out against Tobias's drug trafficking, which Tobias repaid by murdering one of Jefferson's students. This incident was what prompted Jefferson to become the hero Black Lightning in the first place, and while it may have added a superhero to the world, Tobias's brutal way of sending a message shows that he's one of the most powerful crime bosses in all of Metropolis. Coming in at number 7, we have Carmine Falcone, potentially the most powerful member of the criminal underworld that isn't also a billionaire or wears a supervillain outfit. Falcone is the definition of traditional organized crime in Gotham City. Nicknamed the Roman because of his political violence and eagerness to expand his criminal empire, Falcone was one of the earliest foes of the Batman and had nearly the entire Gotham police force on his payroll during the Caped Crusaders' earliest days. And while Batman has since been able to shrink Falcone's influence over Gotham significantly, he's still a dangerous foe that likes to press his advantage every time there's a power vacuum amongst the many supervillains of Gotham City. And speaking of supervillains, coming in at number 6, we have Waylon Jones, aka the infamous Killer Croc. Born with a medical condition that just may be alien in nature and gives him the appearance of a human-crocodile hybrid, Killer Croc initially used his overpowered figure to wrestle with crocodiles for a local circus. However, he soon found out that the world of Gotham's criminal underbelly was far more lucrative for someone of his bloody talents, and became a rising star on the criminal scene, ascending so fast that many other supervillains attempted to kill him before he could become too big of a threat, including the Joker. Ever since, Killer Croc has been considered one of the most dangerous people in Gotham and one of the few criminals willing to literally eat his enemies. Coming in at number 5, we're finally getting to Harvey Dent, aka Two-Face. Originally fighting on the side of justice with Bruce Wayne as Gotham's district attorney, Harvey Dent's mind was split in two following an acid attack from Sal Maroni that scarred exactly one half of his face. Making all of his decisions through a coin flip based on his past childhood trauma, Two-Face is one of the most well-known villains of Batman, and has managed to turn his tragic scarring incident into a criminal empire empire, capable of going toe-to-toe with criminals that Harvey Dent had once put behind bars. He might be crazy and his methods may seem randomly 50-50, but Two-Face is definitely still smart enough to be one of Gotham's most devious criminals. Coming in at number 4, we have Roman Sionis, aka Black Mask. A longtime Batman villain and one of the most prominent figures in the Gotham City underworld, Black Mask is best well known for his, well, black mask, apparently handcrafted out of the coffin of his own mother. Originally a member of the Gotham elite as the CEO of Janus Cosmetics, Roman fell into ruin after his company failed. Blaming Bruce Wayne for his own poor business sense, Roman embraced the name of Black Mask and formed his own criminal organization called the False Face Society, intending to fight back and reclaim the city that he thinks has done him so much wrong. Coming in at number 3, we have Oswald Cobblepot, aka the Penguin. The owner of the Iceberg Lounge, perhaps the most famous criminal hangout in all of Gotham, the Penguin might look similar to his namesake, but is far more deadly in reality. While an impressive crime lord even without any superhuman enhancements, the Penguin is made extra deadly by the special umbrella he carries, which is always stuffed to the brim with different lethal gadgets to help him fight against Batman or any other supervillain that seems interested in starting a turf war. Coming in at number 2, we have the one and only Lex Luthor. Hating the idea of an alien like Superman having so much power and receiving so much love on planet Earth, Lex Luthor has been everything from a mad scientist to a ruthless businessman to even the President of the United States in his desperate quest to rid the world of the Man of Steel once and for all. Throughout all of this, Lex has secretly run one of the world's most high-tech criminal enterprises, using his various connections with other criminals to further his own schemes and either aid LexCorp or hurt Superman. He may be merely a human being, but Lex is a criminal with enough power to stand up to Superman. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have the one and only Joker. With so many interpretations and versions over the years, there's one aspect of the Joker's character that seems to show up more often than not, and that's the amount of henchmen he's able to maintain control of despite his unpredictability and complete insanity. Despite all of that, the Joker's criminal empire is often capable of rivaling even those belonging to villains that have been meticulously plotting their crimes for decades. And because of his sheer unpredictability and the loyalty he's able to inspire in people crazy enough to follow him, the Joker just might be the most dangerous crime boss in the entire DC universe.
Number 10 created his own crime business monopoly. In issue number 50 of The Amazing Spider-Man, which also coincidentally happens to be Kingpin's first appearance ever, Peter Parker decides to call it quits on being Spider-Man. As soon as Kingpin hears tell of this, he decides to take this opportunity to put his master plan into action. He's been aiming to make the world of crime a business since day one, and now is his golden opportunity. He gets together all the major players and they all almost unanimously agree to Kingpin taking charge of a new, fully organized and cohesive criminal empire. Well, except for the big man, who actually tries to return to the world of crime after leaving it and take charge of this new organization that Fisk basically just built. Doesn't go so great for him, as you can imagine. Unfortunately, before the end of the issue, Spider-Man has already returned, so this attempt was kinda short-lived, but it wouldn't stop Kingpin from trying to create a vast and efficient criminal empire in the future, all under his own leadership, of course. And at least it lasted for a few issues there. That attempt. Number 9. Attempted to silence the press. After bringing together his crime monopoly, Kingpin began a massive crime spree, which got the notice of the press. The Daily Bugle started to talk about who could be behind everything that was going on, and decided to cover it, because well, it was news. Kingpin, however, didn't like that they were alerting the public to what was going on, or having anyone poke their nose into his affairs. He kidnapped J. Jonah Jameson in response, and threatened him to stop reporting on the increase in crime, or else. Jameson refused to abide, stating he would not be pressured into having someone tell him what he could or couldn't print in his paper. And fortunately, Spider-Man did end up arriving, and while initially getting beaten, would later save the day. Although that's not quite how Jameson, of course, would remember it. He's like, Spider-Man threatened me. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are enjoying this list and you want more lists on Kingpin, because Kingpin is awesome and he deserves to be hyped, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Betrayed 3, Don Rigoletto. The original Rigoletto. There is actually another Don Rigoletto who succeeded the original. He too, however, was taken out by Kingpin. Wilson Fisk used to be the bodyguard, enforcer, and kind of general right-hand man to Don Rigoletto initially in the comics. However, getting in good with Don was all part of Wilson's elaborate plot to take control of the city. He had been building connections for years, waiting for this moment when he would take out his boss and replace him. Fisk killed Rigoletto in a moment of vulnerability, near the end of issue number 3 of Daredevil, The Man Without Fear. After a meeting, Don was complaining about the request that he'd had to move into more ludicrous areas of crime. At least, areas of crime he considered to be ludicrous. I think most of us would, actually. Fisk seems to respond by giving Don a temple massage to help ease his boss's stress. However, this doesn't last, as while Don is soothed momentarily and at peace, Fisk then decides to snap his neck. The moment also goes to show just how much Don trusted Wilson. Granted, Don Rigoletto was still a crime boss, but Wilson in a lot of ways was probably a worse replacement when it came to how much power he has managed to amass and how dangerously he wields that power. Number 7. Joined Hydra. Kingpin ended up joining up with Hydra later on, even becoming one of its leaders. Or at least, so he thought. When it was revealed that higher up the chain, the Red Skull was also involved, Kingpin decided to break ties. Evil as he was, even he didn't want to be allied with the Red Skull. However, he still, for a time, was the one seemingly controlling Hydra behind the scenes, with Supreme Hydra, who unknowingly was actually his son, Richard, reporting to him. In fact, Richard had actually infiltrated Hydra while his father was in a permanent state of shock, almost comatose, and had set up everything for his dad to simply come along and take control. Too bad Red Skull was involved though. Kingpin's plan at the time was to overthrow the United States government, and he and Hydra, up until the Red Skull reveal, actually made for a pretty powerful alliance. Number 6. Put Aunt May in the ICU. While this one wasn't intentional, Kingpin did end up being the one responsible for almost killing Aunt May. Notably though, Aunt May seems to have some kind of immortality powers, at least when it comes to plots and scripts, as she didn't die here, nor has she ever really properly died anytime her life has been threatened or seemingly even snuffed out. Spider-Man had actually been Kingpin's target. This was after Spider-Man had revealed his true identity of Peter Parker to the world. This put a target on Peter's back, obviously, with Kingpin putting a hit on Spider-Man. However, the shooter who was aiming for Peter missed, and instead hit his Aunt May, who was with Peter at the time. Aunt May ended up on death's doorstep and very nearly died here. Meanwhile, Peter donned his black suit and searched for the one responsible. When he found out it was Fisk, he went to pay Kingpin a visit in prison in issue 542 of Amazing Spider-Man. Oh yeah, Kingpin did all of this from a prison cell, by the way. Peter beat him to within an inch of his life as a warning and declared that if May didn't make it, he would be back to finish the job. It was such an evil thing that it even made Spider-Man momentarily pretty evil. Number 5. First Kill. As tragic as Wilson Fisk's origins are, the fact remains that he committed his first murder at a young age. In the 1998 Daredevil series, considered volume 2 overall, in issue number 15, we get a look back on what Wilson Fisk's childhood was like. His parents struggle to make ends meet and are constantly arguing about the finances. Bills unpaid means that things are constantly turning off in the Fisk household. One such thing they end up losing is the heat, which results in Wilson's pet rat, Benjamin Franklin, freezing to death. At least, I think that's a rat. I wasn't sure if it was a rat or a mouse when I was looking at the comic, but I'm pretty sure it's a rat because of the tail. I'm no animal expert though, or rodent expert for that matter. Fisk becomes obsessed with money, and at one point is paid $15 to start a fire. When a maintenance man gets in the way of his plan, he becomes Wilson's first kill. That is how obsessive young Wilson has become at this point, and continues to be pretty much throughout his life. Pretty obsessive guy. Number 4. Killed Crazy Horse. Crazy Horse was the nickname given to Maya Lopez's aka Echo's father. His real name was Willie Lincoln, and he ended up dying because of his connection to Kingpin. Initially, Wilson and Willie were best friends, thick as thieves, and Fisk appreciated Willie's off-the-wall nature. Wilson himself was a bit crazy when it came to his behavior at the time, and having Crazy Horse around helped him to feel, I guess, a little bit more sane by comparison. That is until Crazy Horse got a little too wild even for Wilson. Kingpin ordered Lincoln killed, and then raised Maya as his ward. He sent her to all the best schools, seeing potential in her. You can imagine Maya's reaction when years later she realized that Wilson was the one responsible for taking her father from her. She attempted to kill Wilson, shooting him point blank in the head. Fisk would actually surprisingly survive this, though he would be left blind for a time as a result of that attack. I still can't believe that he survived it. That's crazy. Number 3. Brutally kills Anatoly Renskahov. In the Daredevil Netflix series, Anatoly Renskahov is a leader of the Russian mafia in New York. When he fails the Kingpin, unable to get the true name of Daredevil from night nurse Claire Temple, Kingpin decides he wants to have a word with Anatoly. Renskahov comes forward himself, actually wishing to speak with Kingpin and kind of clear the air. But this is not the type of word Kingpin had in mind. Instead, Fisk begins to attack Renskahov, and despite Renskahov's own toughness, the man survived life in Russian prison after all, Fisk kills him using a car door to crush his head. The crazy part is throughout the scene we learn it is not Renskahov's failure that has actually ignited Fisk's rage here, but the fact that he embarrassed Wilson in front of Vanessa while the two were on a date. This just goes to show how dangerous it is to upset Kingpin, as he has generally been shown as having a very violent streak and a sometimes off-the-wall temper. To relive this moment, you can return to the shocking end of episode 4 of season 1. The Daredevil series, at least in Canada by the way, is still on Netflix and available to stream. I was watching it earlier. It's great. Number 2. Killed Spider-Man. Sometimes people forget the Kingpin isn't just a Daredevil villain, he's a prominent Spider-Man villain as well. In fact, his first appearance wasn't in Daredevil, it was actually in an issue of Amazing Spider-Man, issue number 50 to be exact, which we actually talked about at the beginning of this list. So it didn't come as a surprise when he showed up as the main villain in the Spider-Man animated film Into the Spider-Verse, at least for fans that know this about him, I guess. What did come as a surprise though was that he actually succeeded in killing Spider-Man, aka Peter Parker, in the movie. Fortunately, at the same time, Spider-Man, aka Miles Morales, was just discovering his own spider powers, and had a multiversal team of spider folks end up joining him in order to stop Wilson Fisk's evil plot. Still, Kingpin did kill Peter Parker in cold blood, and then also tried to play it like he'd always thought of Spider-Man as a great hero and was friends with the guy, even throwing a banquet in Spider-Man's honor afterward and inviting love of his life, Mary Jane Watson, to it. Wow. Number 1. Completely ruined Daredevil's life. During the Born Again story arc, Daredevil's true identity as Matt Murdock ends up being used against him. Kingpin ends up acquiring this information, which was sold by Karen Page for drugs in Mexico, but finds its way to him in New York. Kingpin then attempts to ruin Matt Murdock and thereby Daredevil's life in every conceivable way. His house ends up being firebombed, and even his uniform is left in tatters. His accounts are frozen by the IRS. Fisk even tries to ruin his reputation as a lawyer by getting a police lieutenant to swear that he saw Murdock bribe a witness to commit an act of perjury while on the stand. Not only that, but he also threatens the life of Karen Page as well, almost killing her.
And it's Hammerhead. Growing up, his father would berate him for speaking Italian in their Russian household and would beat the boy with a hammer when punishing him. So, you know, Father of the Year right there. I guess that's kinda how he got the name. In school, he would later lie and say that he was Italian, only for a bully named Rico to reveal his lie and then steal the hat he wore, showing the ugly scars on his head from frequent hammer blows. Rico and his girlfriend would be the kills that Hammerhead needed to join the mob though. Hammerhead convinced the mob that he was Italian, which was necessary since they didn't really accept inferior stock, as they would call it, and he eventually killed his father with a much bigger hammer than his father ever used on him. Poetic justice. When his head was shattered in a brawl though, Jonas Harrow discovered him in an alley and operated on him, replacing his broken skull with one made of steel, whereas some versions make this an adamantium head instead. He would later go on to get a full body robotic upgrade from Mr. Negative after being shot in the back of the head with a special bullet, which would have killed him. This is definitely some alpha energy.
Coming in at number 9, we have Crossbones. A genetically enhanced mercenary with a hazy past, Crossbones wandered the world as an independent gun for hire until finally catching the attention of the villainous Red Skull. With proficiency in most forms of weapon known to man and a particular liking for stiletto blade enhanced gauntlets, Crossbones doesn't really have an ulterior motive or dreams of world domination, but rather will do whatever grisly task a supervillain is willing to pay him for, such as the time at the end of Civil War where he took advantage of the chaos and seemingly assassinated Captain America. Whatever the nasty job, Crossbones is willing to do it, and that's what makes him such a dangerous villain.
And it ain't Silvermane. As a teacher, Silvio Manfredi joined a criminal organization known as the Magia. With his cunning and superior fighting skills, Manfredi rose to the top of the Magia's ranks. He later became the head of a family, which in mob terms just meant a group of loyal members, not actually like related or anything. By creating gang wars, he increased the power of the Manfredi family, and in the process he also increased the power of the Magia as a whole, which pleased his superiors, obviously, because more power, it's more power. Manfredi also married a woman named Catherine and fathered a son, but when he was middle-aged, his hair became white, which led to the nickname that he grew to accept, Silvermane. Crime fighters Cloak and Dagger decided to take down Silvermane because of his role in illegal drug trafficking in New York City. Dagger attacked Silvermane and nearly killed him using her powers. However, doctors saved Silvermane's life by transporting his brain, most of his head, and other vital organs into a robotic body that would then provide him with superhuman strength. Which is nuts, and exactly why we shouldn't try and put our brains in robots. I've been saying this since this list. Don't do it.
Coming in at number 7, we have Boomerang. Originally hailing from Australia and given his identity as a stereotypical joke by an offshoot of Hydra, Boomerang has no actual superhuman abilities, just an incredibly gifted throwing arm that has been utilized over the years to throw more and more intricate high-tech boomerangs. Best known as a thorn in Spider-Man's side and one of the founding members of the superior foes of Spider-Man, Boomerang would eventually begin to have a change of heart after becoming Peter Parker's roommate and getting a bit too over his head with his relationship to the Kingpin. Nevertheless, Boomerang's incredible accuracy and the quality of his high-tech gadgets means that he's not a villain to underestimate.
And at 6, Tombstone. Lonnie Lincoln was born and raised in Harlem, New York. He had a congenital disorder characterized by the complete absence of pigment in his skin, which made him an outcast among the children his age. He also had a problem with his vocal cords, making him speak in whispers. The only student who didn't ostracize Lincoln was aspiring reporter Joe Robinson, causing Lonnie to misconstrue this lack of hostility as a token of friendship. 8 years after their senior year, Tombstone had grown to become a mob enforcer in Philadelphia, where Robertson happened to work as a reporter. When Lincoln tried to kill crime boss Saulsy Montana, his employee witnessed the murder and contacted the newspaper where Robbie worked. Robbie was about to meet with Hipper when Tombstone killed him and arrived at their point of meeting, only to find Tombstone taunting him with the man's corpse. Tombstone let Robbie go though, just because they used to be friends, but later taunted him on the phone, prompting Robbie to flee with his wife back to New York, where he became an acclaimed reporter for the Daily Bugle. This dude is freaking messed up, and if you've seen him in like the 90s Spider-Man cartoon, that version's even freakier.
Coming in at number 5, we have Typhoid Mary. A very powerful mutant with multiple personality disorder, Mary is capable of telekinesis, telepathy, and manipulating fire when under the influence of her more violent Typhoid and Bloody Mary personas. Her transformations between personalities are so intense that even Daredevil was not able to tell after encountering 2 personalities that they were the same person, despite his increased senses supposedly being immune to her trickery. Despite being a mutant, Mary has most often fought with both Daredevil and Spider-Man, giving these street-level heroes a headache as they try to deal with multiple violent women in one deadly body.
And at 4, Kingpin. A crime boss is one thing. A crime boss that to the public is a well-respected philanthropist and businessman is something else. But this businessman is like 300 pounds of muscle. Wilson Fisk is an absolute madman who runs most of New York's and Las Vegas's criminal underworld. However, things get even more intense after his wife is killed, so he doesn't end up retiring, which he was actually going to do, but you know, then they killed his wife. After the murder of his wife, not only did he resume leadership of his former organization, but he also turned over his files on other criminal leaders to the law through the costumed crime fighter of Daredevil. Kingpin actually helped Daredevil, except now this time he had the motive of ridding himself of any and all rivals. The ploy actually worked though, and as a result of the evidence in the files, many crime leaders both inside and outside the Magia were convicted. In the ensuing power vacuum, the Kingpin rebuilt his coalition stronger than ever before. He moved on to control a great majority of non-Magia East Coast gangs dealing in conventional crimes, and the Kingpin's organization became stronger than any single Magia family in the New York area.
Coming in at number 3, we have Barracuda, the arch nemesis of the Punisher. An optimistic and smiling serial killer and gangster, the Barracuda is everything the Punisher stands against and more. Originally just hired by a larger criminal organization to assassinate Frank Castle, the Barracuda's rivalry with the Punisher became personal when their ensuing battle caused the Barracuda to lose both an eye and all the fingers on his right hand. The Barracuda might not have any superpowers himself, but his depravity and lust for violence are essentially unmatched, with multiple moments over the years that rank as some of Marvel's edgiest, such as snorting drugs off of a fresh human skull and engaging in literal cannibalism.
Penultimately, into number 2, The Hood. After seeing Electro fight Daredevil as a child, the life of a supervillain really enticed Parker Robbins. With a mother in need of constant medical care, he soon dropped out of high school to steal money to give her better care. His cousin John told him about some valuable material perfect to steal at a nearby warehouse, and together, they broke into it. They were about to leave when they were attacked by a demon in a cloak. Peter shot the being and assumed that he had killed it, but not wanting to leave empty-handed, he took the cloak and the boots. For some reason, I don't know why he thought you were gonna get any money for it, but whatever. On the way home, he was jumped for his shoes and used the boots to escape. And upon finding out that the boots actually gave him the ability to walk on air, he took the cloak over to John's apartment, where he found out that the cloak gave him powers as well, originating from the demon Dormammu, though he didn't know it at the time. A dude with a cloak and boots giving him a fraction of the powers of Dormammu? Yeah, that's a number 2 for me. Pun intended now.
And coming in at our top spot, we've got to go with the classic Daredevil villain, Bullseye. An incredibly skilled assassin with nearly perfect accuracy, Bullseye ranks as one of the greatest villains that heroes like Spider-Man and Daredevil have ever had to face. Bullseye was responsible for the death of Elektra and appears to have zero regard for life or any sense of moral goodness, with even other members of the Dark Avengers being disgusted at his lust for murder when he was briefly a member of their team. While Bullseye often finds himself under the employ of characters such as the KINGPIN or Norman Osborn, his rather unique powers and his complete lack of empathy make him potentially the most deadly street-level villain of all.